Greetings, everybody. Thanks so much for coming to Aqus Cafe. I'd like to thank everybody that's here and thank everybody that's working behind the bar. Please, yes, give a round of applause to everybody here. That's great. And please tip our workers at the cafe, and special thanks to John Crowley and everybody that helps put together the Aqus community. I'm Mickey Huff, the director of Project Censored. We do a lecture series here, second Tuesday of the month. This is the last one of the season, and we will reconvene in the fall. We are actually right now at Project Censored working on our 40th anniversary book, so we'll be having a couple of celebrations coming up this fall. You're all invited to Sonoma State October 21 and 22 for the Media Freedom Summit, and you can check out our website, projectcensored.org, for more information about that. This evening's program really connects in a lot of ways to Project Censored, because former director of Project Censored, Dr. Peter Phillips, who's a sociology professor at Sonoma State University, is here. Big round of applause for Peter and his students. And tonight is really a great celebration of what Project Censored does, which is contribute to public education, critical media literacy. And Peter teaches a class called, it's a class on public sociology, and a lot of what Project Censored does, of course, is, well, based on public critical media literacy. In other words, doing research and education and teaching that's not just for people in the academy and not just for journal publications that 3 people might read, but it's actually for the benefit and the betterment of the public at large. And so this evening's title is Investigative Sociology. That's Peter's course title. Facing and Overcoming Societal Challenges in Sonoma County is our theme, and those of you that know the lecture series know that what we try to do is we try to bring global and local issues together, and that's certainly what's happening this evening with our student research groups. So they are tackling pretty big issues. The first group is going to be tackling the ongoing crisis of homelessness, and each of the students, when they're presenting, they will introduce themselves to everybody, and they'll say a little bit about what they're doing at Sonoma State University, maybe in Peter's class, and then they have a lot of information to share. The second group is Civilian Review Boards as a Response to Police Misconduct. So that's a very timely story as well. And again, right here in Sonoma County is some of this focus. And the final group is Fukushima Radiation and Nuclear Power. We have students presenting on, well, what's wrong with what's happening with nuclear power. And again, Project Censored has covered stories about these issues from a global perspective, a national perspective. Tonight you're going to get more of a local flair and perspective on all of those issues. Also, John Bertucci is here from Petaluma Community Access, so I wanted to thank the camera folks, Mark and Mike from PCA, for being here and making this available to the broader public. Also, Sam Freed is here doing research. Big round of applause for community media. And John also is involved with Fukushima Response, and so he was a community evaluator and advisor and worked with students in the group about this important issue. So again, I want to thank everybody for being here, and I'd like at that to introduce to you Dr. Peter Phillips. He's going to say a little bit about the course and the students, and then we're going to revolve through each of the student groups, and then when we're finished doing that, we're going to have a little bit of discussion about maybe some Q&A or discussion from you all about what the students had presented. So again, thanks everybody for being here, and with that, here's Peter Phillips.
Well, thank you very much. This course has been going for several years. It is part of the requirements of a sociology major to do a community experience course. You can do that through internship or this investigative course and some other courses that meet that requirement. I have to acknowledge, however, probably the person that really helped found this course was a good friend of mine, Jeff Davidian from Milwaukee, who's an investigative reporter. We tried to teach this course, what, 10 years ago?
20.
No, it wasn't that long ago. 17. And you really irritated the dean, and you weren't invited back. But that was because you requested freedom of information from the Cotati police on all their traffic stops. And they were required to give it, but they complained bitterly because you were looking at profiling. So this course, these are groups of students 4, 5, 6. They pick a topic, their own. It needs to be locally based, and it can be, there's 3 major topics today. We've done a lot of different things, but this is the first time that we've actually been able to do public presentations out in the public, and I'm really happy about that. That was Mickey's idea to help make that happen, and so I know they're anxious about this. Some of them are a little nervous, but I think they've really done some hard work. They have to first read everything they can about the topic. They build their own textbook, so they have a literature review that's hundreds of pages long, which they have to prepare, and everybody's got the same, so they're all in the same place, and they're reading. Then they go out and interview people in the community. They find community groups. Some do survey work, some do observing what's happening. So there's a lot of different activities that are part of this. Then they produce a paper, minimum 15 pages, that they all collectively write together, and then we try to get these published. So that's the process, and it's really delightful. They're working together as a research group, and they each have to keep a journal of all their activities. So that's how I grade them individually, but collectively they're doing this work together. So thank you very much, and Mickey, I'll let you take over.
All right. Thanks so much, Peter. And again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and it is a pleasure to see so many familiar faces. It's certainly great to see Jeff Davidian, who's in town, who has been a judge and worked with Project Censored for a really long time. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't wish my good friend Michael Sloan happy birthday, who's at the bar in the very colorful attire, who's up here from Escondido, used to long-time Sonoma County resident, so we're also celebrating with him. With that, I want to hand over to the students, and they're going to again introduce themselves and their topic. Try to keep these to about 15 minutes each, so there's time for more conversation, meaning 15 minutes for each group. So try to go through and share the information you can, and hopefully people will take some notes and we'll have conversation later. So with that, here you go.
Okay, so as was mentioned, we're doing our report on homelessness, but our topic was actually activism, but sort of under the umbrella of activism, we chose the topic of homelessness. And my name's Ryan. I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit today about the cost of doing nothing about homelessness, and just a little bit of the history of homelessness, the history of research on homelessness, and going to bring us up to around the 1980s, and then my other group members will take over from there.
My name is Greg Connor, and I will be talking about the criminalization of homelessness and how police and the community are both working with homelessness and how it's changed over the times.
My name is Manny Chow, and I will be talking about the current issues of homelessness in Sonoma County.
And my name is Amy, and I am a senior. I'm going to be graduating next week, and I'll be talking about what Sonoma County as a community is doing about homelessness.
I'm Jed Sleeper. I'm a senior, and I'll be talking about what we can do to solve the issue of homelessness in Sonoma County.
Okay, so I'm going to start with why should we care about homelessness? I mean, obviously you guys have got 1,000 things on your plate. I'm sure you guys are all busy, struggling to make ends meet, and why should we do anything? What's going to convince us to do stuff about homelessness? And I'd like to bring to your attention the story of $1 Million Murray. I think this is a great way to sum up the cost of doing nothing. $1 Million Murray was a bear of a man. He was an ex-Marine, 6 foot tall, heavy set, with this thick black hair and tan skin. And somehow his toothless smile accentuated his charismatic demeanor. Everybody loved Murray. Officer O'Brien has been picking up Murray and others like him his entire career. We would pick him up several times a day. He would go in to get detoxed, and then later just go out and start the whole cycle over again and get picked up again. And so over the years, O'Brien and Murray eventually built a relationship. And Murray was assigned to a residentiary treatment program that was similar to house arrest. He really excelled there. He quit drinking and actually saved up around $6,000. After the program ended, however, Murray was kicked right back onto the streets. And of course, he went back to his old habits and blew through his savings on alcohol and basic necessities in about 2 weeks. And so, now that he was out of jail, back to his old habits, he would often be too intoxicated for jail. He would first have to be sent to a hospital to be detoxed and then go to jail. So that costs a lot to have him sent to a hospital and then have the police come pick him up and back and forth. And so one time after leaving jail, he had a 6-month period of freedom, and he racked up over $100,000 in medical bills in just that 6-month period. And of the 10 years total that he was on the streets, Officer O'Brien estimated that it must have cost us at least $1 million not to do something about Murray. And so, the cost of doing nothing is a price none of us can afford. Origins of research on homelessness began in these hobohemia areas, also known as Skid Row, and this was all prior to World War II. These were places with concentrations of single-occupancy hotels, boarding rooms, and low-cost eateries. Transient laborers were really attracted to these places because they would get employment agencies that would settle there, and they would really look for people who could work short-term. And so even though people in these Skid Row areas were working and they were sheltered, they were considered homeless because they didn't conform to that ideology at the time of the nuclear family. A family was really what was really made a house a home. And so after World War II, the demand for transient labor increased, and we start to see a decrease in homelessness and also a decrease in studies on homelessness until about the 1980s. In the 1980s, we see sort of a new face of homelessness, and it was women, children, and families who were now homeless rather than just older single men who were sort of transient and looking for work. And some, such as Professor Peter Dreyer, believe that Reagan's presidency was a major factor in the emergence of the new homeless. In 1982, there were 6.5 million low-income housing units and about 6.2 million families living in poverty to fill them. So there was obviously an excess of units. By the 1985, there were only 5.6 million low-cost units for about 8.9 families in need. So that meant there were about 3.3 million more units needed than there were families who could fill them. And the lack of funding to build those 3.3 million units that would house people in need, the 3.3 million people in need, was largely in part due to Reagan appointing a housing task force of politically connected landlords and bankers. This task force called for free and deregulated markets as an alternative to government assistance. And so consequentially, this is going to raise housing budgets. This is going to cut housing budgets in half for low-income areas. And of course, this brings us to today.
Alright, so, like Ryan said, it's an issue that's been around for a very long time. And with it being around for such a long time, a stigma has been built that homeless people are down their luck, they are lazy, they don't want to work, they just want to, they'll panhandle to get as much money as possible, not to get into a house or get into a hotel, but they'll do it to get alcohol or drugs. And this stigma is so strong that our police are now having to enforce this because that is why we call them. I've personally have had a homeless guy at the front door of my store in Katati, and I had nothing other to do, I couldn't do anything else other than call the cops because I had no idea what to do. And because of this stigma, the police are getting more and more involved, and we need to start working with them. But the laws that are being implemented by both the county and the police, one of them is realignment. And this is a change in the jail system, where instead of people who deserve to be in prison for a crime they commit, they will be sent to jail instead. And because of this, it's becoming very impacted. And that goes hand in hand with a proposition that came out a couple years ago called Proposition 47, where this changes the charge from a felony down to a misdemeanor, or if it's a misdemeanor, it just will be a misdemeanor. And because of this, people are being sent, or homeless people are being sent to jail for just loitering, trespassing, public urination, and anything else like such. And then this also goes along with the three strikes rule that came out in the past, where after 3 offenses, you will immediately be sent to jail. So those non-violent crimes that are committed, or so-called committed by the homeless, are ones that they can't help, but it's something that it's stuck with them. They have to do what they can to survive, and because of that, they are being stigmatized as criminals. During a open forum in Santa Rosa called Lost in Paradise, Vice Mayor of Santa Rosa, Todd Schwedhelm, said a quote that really stuck with me. "We can't arrest our way out of the homeless problem." And that stuck with me because when I was a kid, back in like 2000, I met an old lady. She had a dog, a shopping cart filled with all her stuff. And as a kid, I didn't see her as a homeless person, I just saw her as a person. So I began to talk to her. And she told me a very ludicrous story of how she worked with the Kasadi police and would help them take in a guy known as Crazy George. That's what she called him. And anytime they take him in, they'd have to let him go that night of because they didn't have anything to hold him on. Looking back at it now with having more like thought process, I'm pretty sure she was telling a story about herself. And because of the programs that we don't have to help homeless people and the stigma we have, the police weren't there to help her. The community wasn't there to help her. And because the community wasn't there, she ended up committing suicide because of her unfortunate position. So, with more awareness, I believe the police departments and the help of community programs like Catholic Charities or all the other programs that are out there, we can bring more awareness to the problem with homelessness, diminish that stigma that we have of homeless people, and actually give them a start to a new life. And that is an issue that we all face.
All right, so I'm going to be talking about the issues in Sonoma County. So the first issue that comes up are the barriers to get into shelters and rehousing programs. So historically, priority was given on a first-come, first-served basis, but this excluded people who were disabled. And other barriers in place, other barriers in place included rejected access to services or shelters because of things like not being sober or on drugs, having mental issues, or simply just not getting themselves to the shelters on time. All right, and then the next notable issue is a stigma called NIMBY, or not in my backyard. So NIMBY is basically, when it comes to like homeless services, most members within the community are usually pretty supportive of it, so long as it's not near their homes or local area. And I believe the stigma for NIMBY comes from stereotypes and misconceptions of homeless, including what Greg talked about, like them being lazy or drugs or like addicted to drugs. And another common argument that is present in the NIMBY community is shelters and services in a local area will lead to an increase in crime, litter, theft, violence, as well as the property value of their homes going down. Now, to talk about the current housing market, as many of you may know, living in Sonoma County, affordable housing is really hard to find. Like, I believe our rent here is probably among the most expensive in the nation. So there is aid available for people looking for affordable housing, such as Section 8 in Santa Rosa, which I have the definition here. It's a federal subsidy program that helps low-income families to afford market-rate private rental housing within the city limits. All right, so ideally, Section 8 was created to address the lack of affordable housing in Sonoma County. However, in our current housing market, even Section 8 voucher holders can't find a place to rent. And the reason being is because property owners are taking advantage of the high market values of homes, and with this, landlords raise their rent in order to maximize their profits. And so there are people that have Section 8 vouchers, but are still unable to get a home because of the NIMBY stigma that we talked about. All right, so to continue on, because of the high market value of homes and property owners taking advantage of this, families and individuals that fall into the extremely low income categories need to spend up to 80 to 90% of their income on housing or face homelessness. And with 80 to 90% of their income going towards housing, this doesn't leave enough money for other basic needs such as food and transportation, etc. And I have on right here. So just looking at the numbers, rent in Sonoma County since 2012 has increased 30%, which averages to about $1,600 a month, which is a lot. And then a majority of renters in Sonoma County earn less than 50% of the median income and use more than half of their income for rent. And to give an idea of the extent of this problem, the accepted affordable housing rate is 30% or less towards income. And I'm going to be talking about the distribution model. But basically, the distribution model is just how the state of California distributes grants to the different counties to fund these homeless programs. So for the old model, it's a competition based, and it ranked counties amongst each other based on the ability to meet high threshold of people coming in to receive homeless services. The higher county ranked, the more money it will receive from the state. So this model actually worked really well for Sonoma County because we ranked among the highest in the nation when it comes to meeting this high threshold of providing homeless services. And then this year, HUD, they're moving on to a newer model, which is called the fair share model, which basically means that money is available to counties regardless if they were competitive or not in the old model. And this model is disadvantageous to Sonoma County, obviously, because even though we rank among the highest in the state in providing homeless services and meeting that high threshold, we receive the same amount as every other county. And this is unfortunate because unlike a lot of other counties, Sonoma County has the infrastructure and agencies in order to utilize the funding properly and effectively, while a lot of other counties can't say the same. And I believe we're receiving less. So with the old model, which is supposed to start in October, that's when the new funding cycle starts. So last year, Sonoma County received $1.2 million in grants to fund these homeless programs. But this year, we're expected to face a decrease of 60%, which basically doesn't give our county enough time to properly adapt. And this means our programs are losing hundreds and thousands of dollars. All right, and then for this last part, I'll be talking about density bonuses. And density bonuses is basically, they're granted for projects in which the developers agree to include a certain number of affordable housing units, which is very beneficial for our homeless population. The problem with that is that the state is no longer funding density bonuses, which means redevelopment and rehousing programs are taking a big hit, and it makes it difficult to get these homeless people into affordable housing. And I believe this is the reason why this is happening is because Governor Brown has eliminated funds for redevelopment and housing in order to clear the state's fiscal budget for things like education. And then, which obviously makes it even more difficult to provide permanent housing for our homeless population. So I guess the biggest question on everyone's mind now is, what are we currently doing as a county? So I will hand it over to Amy.
So my question is, what is Sonoma County doing as a community? So if you were to go down on any weeknight and drive around Railroad Square, you would see that there are a lot of visible homeless people that are down in the streets, that are sleeping in the doorways and under the bridges. So we have a lot of visible homeless right now. That's in our county. It can easily lead to thinking that Sonoma County isn't doing anything about our homeless. It could be thought that, or at least that we're just not doing enough. So we'll look at Sonoma County as a county. So Sonoma County, our supervisors, underneath them is the Community Development Commission, and they have created the Continuum of Care as of 1997. That is a collection of all the cities in the county, different nonprofits, public and private businesses are all coming together to pool their resources together to see what they can do to help solve some of the issues. They adopted a 10-year homeless action plan in 2007 and have done some updates to that. In 2009, they conducted their first homeless count for HUD funding, and you can see some of the things that they've done in there. On top of each other. And in August of 2015, they created the Policymakers Toolbox for ending homelessness. The other thing that they're doing is they've created HOST. You may have heard of the Homeless Outreach Services Team. They've been in the news a lot lately. This started as a test program in 2014 by our county supervisors. It's operated by Catholic Charities. They started with a target area in Santa Rosa that had specific borders that were Highway 101 on the east, Fulton and Wright for the west, Guerneville Road for the north, and Sebastopol Road for the south border, focusing on the creek trails. This team was going out and making direct contact with folks that were living on our creeks and living in kind of the out of the way areas. Making contact with folks, making sure that they're okay, providing some basic necessities, and also trying to do some vulnerability assessments of folks to see how in danger they were to being on the streets. The first 6 months, they had 792 engagements with unsheltered individuals. They did 473 vulnerability assessments. They were able to provide access to shelter to 142 individuals, and 31 of them were now permanently housed. This group, this host team, is now funded partially by the city, Sonoma County, and also by the city of Santa Rosa, because they were seeing really truly a change in the way that we were interacting with our homeless community. And this also is helpful for our police department. Instead of our business owners calling the police because they're having a homeless person that may be sleeping in their doorway, they can contact the host team to come out and make contact. And that way they're making more of a personal interaction with people. Instead of saying, hey, you know, person, get out of here, you know, you're not supposed to be here. But it's, hey, you know, Murray, they're talked to as an individual, and they know more about what they need as an individual and what some more of their issues are. And then in March of 2015, they've also expanded their area. As I mentioned, in 2009, we started doing homeless counts as a way to get access to funding and looking at who our homeless population is. Between 2009 and 2013, the population of our homeless youth grew to 1,128. This is 22% of the homeless population in our county. And when I say homeless youth, just to define that, that is those that are unaccompanied, and they're 18 to 24. This is the highest per capita rate in the nation. Quite shocking. That brings us to the social advocacy for youth, or known as SAY, more affectionately. They started in 1971. And they have had some great progress in reaching out and creating some services for the youth in our community. And then in 2015, they created the Dream Center, which is a homeless center that has housing over 70 homeless youth at the Old Warwick Hospital in Santa Rosa. And then we're going to talk about Catholic Charities. Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Santa Rosa, they are the largest nonprofit service provider in Sonoma County. They also cover a large service area. I was really surprised to hear that they also cover Napa, Mendocino, Lake, Humboldt, and Tornado counties.
Del Norte.
Del Norte, that is it, thank you. So they, just here, the Santa Rosa Diocese covers that entire area, service area. They offer over 20 different programs. They have their homeless service center that provides intakes and counseling and showers and day services for folks. Then there's also the Family Support Center that has the 138 beds. That's in downtown Santa Rosa. They have the Samuel L. Jones Hall that has 138 beds. They also have Nightingale, which is a short-term transitional care that offers 26 beds for homeless individuals once they're released out of the hospital. If they're not ready, how many people when they're, get out of the hospital are healthy enough to go take care of themselves? Sometimes we need a little bit of help in between, and that's how the Nightingale has came into play, providing 26 beds for folks coming out of the hospital. They now also provide the safe parking in locations all around Sonoma County, where it's getting safe people to be able to stay in their car overnight. Some of those parking areas are also providing access to some other things like some food and some basic necessities. They also have 100 units of transitional housing. They also provide permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. And if that's not enough, they also have coach to career employment services where they're helping folks get a job. And they even have and they have the showers too. They also run the shower that's now going around, a mobile shower unit that just came out recently that's providing services in 4 days a week, I believe. If that wasn't enough, they also have free coffee and hot chocolate on Fridays from 7 to 9 a.m. Then we have the Redwood Gospel Mission. The Redwood Gospel Mission is a faith-based nonprofit in Santa Rosa. They have the Men's Mission with 80 beds and shelters for up to 6 months. The Rose Emergency Shelter for women and children. The New Life Program, which is a resident substance abuse program where they can stay for 10 to 16 months. There's the Manna Home Program for women. There's the Gospel Mission Thrift Store. And then as recently as the picture we have here is there's also a job training program of roasting coffee that they're selling to other churches. And then we can talk about the Meal Gap in Sonoma County. Sonoma County has 495,025 people. And if we were to look at the hunger index that was created, this is a little graphic that that shows that 35 million meals were missed in 2014, and that 52,000 meals were provided by food assistance programs, including the Redwood Empire Food Bank, which provides food for 82,000 people every single month, including children, seniors, families, and individuals. Then you're looking at, what about our community? We're talking about those large nonprofits that are there. We have the Nomadic Shelter that just started last year with 30 churches have come together and are offering their a location at their church one night a month for up to 40 people to spend the night. The first year they did that for 4 months. This year it lasted for a full 6 months, and they're looking to make that program go year round. And what's kind of nice about that is that all the church has to do is they provide a meal and friendly conversation for folks, and the gospel mission comes in and brings mats and clean bedding for them to have every single night. Then we have the living room that, my pictures didn't come out right, sorry. The living room, which is a nonprofit that's been around for 23 years. They provide a day services for just women and children only, and they provide meal, clothing, and support. And it's estimated that 90% of the clients served are exposed to domestic violence. Holidays can also be really lonely. The Gospel Mission hosts a Thanksgiving feast that feeds thousands of people with help from over 100 volunteers from the community that come out to help them out. And then also that one picture there is, that's Danica O'Leary. That's Haircuts for the Homeless that she does once a month in Juilliard Park. That's just a few things to show that Sonoma County is really coming together as a community to do things for our homeless population. And let's talk about some of the things we can do to solve the issue.
Still me. Yeah, so what can we do to overcome our homeless problem, or our homeless issues in Sonoma County? I don't think anyone in our group understood how complex this issue was going to be and how hard this question was going to be to answer, but basically the simplest answer we've come up with is to give them houses. Oh, sorry, thank you. Yeah, so it's important to understand, go ahead. It's important to understand that we're not looking to eliminate homelessness completely. We're looking for a functional zero, which means that when someone falls into homelessness, they can assume that they'll be taken care of, that they'll find themselves with a roof over their heads and connected to the services that they need, as well as having a roof over their head. Go ahead. So Housing First is a program that seeks to put a roof over someone's head so that they don't have to deal with the other issues that they have until they've got that issue dealt with. Yeah, so building homes, Policymakers Toolbox for Ending Homelessness, I think Amy may have mentioned that. It's basically a complete guide to this kind of program. It has outlined policy changes, housing options, and estimated costs. The problem with all of this is that we're not going to reach a functional zero overnight, but people are sleeping on the streets tonight. So this is an issue that we have to deal with now. So how do we decide where our resources go in the meantime? Sorry, yeah. The vulnerability index answers that. The host teams that Amy talked about, she was talking about a little bit. Basically, this is a way that we can rank who needs our services most, because the problem needs to be dealt with now. It's an ongoing situation. Go ahead. Another thing we can do as a community is we need to work to change the face of homelessness. A lot of the NIMBY folks that we were talking about, this is who they see. This represents a very minute amount of the population out there. So the problem population that these people are worried about, it's not the majority of the people on the streets. This is more like the people that we're thinking about. These people are our community members. They're families on the streets that need our help. They are already our neighbors. It's up to us as a community to advocate for these people. Go ahead. Like this, I believe this was the Lost in Paradise. It's up to us as a community to advocate for these people because they're increasingly voiceless themselves. They need to have someone speak up for them. It's up to us to advocate for more Section 8 housing, more affordable low-income housing, and places to put these people. A great example of a Housing First model in Sonoma County is the Palms Inn, which is a program. Basically, it was a hotel that was converted to single occupancy dormitories. It's now housing over 60 veterans, I believe, mixed in with other homeless individuals. And lastly, hope is the biggest thing here in this fight. It's out on the streets, people become increasingly hopeless. It's up to us to reinstill this hope, show them that there's still hope out there. And in doing so, also, it helps to foster hope within the people that would like to solve these issues. Yeah, so our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. Thank you for listening to us. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed putting it together.
Thank you so much. For those of you that came in late, I'm Mickey Huff, the director of Project Censored. This is the Project Censored lecture series here at Aqus Cafe. We're tonight listening to and hopefully talking more with students of Peter Phillips at Sonoma State University for his investigative sociology class. So I'd like to thank everybody here for their great presentation. And we're now going to bring up our next group. The next group is on civilian review boards as a response to police misconduct. So that's also another timely issue, certainly nationally, of course globally with U.S. Empire, but also locally right here in Sonoma County, as many people may be aware. So this next group is going to come up. They'll briefly introduce themselves to you, and they'll go ahead and share their research findings. So let's give another round of applause to the next group of students. Thank you.
All right, hi, I'm Courtney.
Hi, I'm Marisol.
I'm Vadim.
I'm Justine.
So we decided to go with doing our topic on police brutality and police misconduct in Sonoma County. From starting our research and everything, we found that the most successful idea that we came across and that we support is having and implementing a civilian review board in Sonoma County. So we researched and we found successful civilian review boards to start our plan and what would work best with our plan. We interviewed Tom Schwedhelm, which is the Vice Mayor of Santa Rosa, and former police chief in Santa Rosa. And then we also interviewed with Jerry 3, the Director of Independent Office of Law Enforcement and Review Outreach. So here we'll kind of talk about what we found within the answers that we really got and what we were looking for. So Tom Schwedhelm believes that the implementation of a civilian review board will not fix the relationship between the community and the police, and that there should be further research done on what kind of trust we can build within the community and the police. And then that Jerry 3 wants to have a uniform review of all police. So he is very for auditing the police and everything that they're doing.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the 3 bottom ones about police brutality that have happened in Sonoma County.
Much closer.
One of the incidents that happened in Roner Park when a police officer had pulled out a gun on a man, and the victim was Ron McComas. He was securing his bow on the back of his vehicle, and that's when the cop pulled up. And originally the officer came into the area because somebody was complaining about the parking. And after a while, when he was circling around the area, McComas decided to take out his phone and record what was going on. And after a couple of minutes, when the officer was just sitting down in his vehicle staring at him, McComas went closer to the vehicle to record the license plate of the vehicle of the officer. And after a while, the officer asked him to take his hand out of his pocket, and that's when McComas was starting to get angry because he knew that he wasn't doing anything wrong. And then that's when the officer pulled out his gun. So after that, McComas has gotten an attorney and has filed a lawsuit against the city and the police department. Another case is for Gabby Lemus. That was an 18-year-old girl from here, Petaluma, who was arrested for resisting arrest and for battery on police officer. She originally was defending her sister because she thought she wasn't being treated fairly by the deputy, but she claims that she was violated from her freedom of speech and her constitutional right against police brutality. She also filed a lawsuit against the deputy and said that she was filing it against her arrest and assault by Deputy Marcus Holton. And this was actually recorded with the body camera that the deputy had, and the video has actually been released to the public. And then the third one that I found was the Sonoma County jail beatings. Daniel Banks and Marcus Martinez are two of the inmates who were beaten that day. And they also filed a lawsuit against the jail and the deputies who were beaten. The beatings lasted for about 5 hours, and some of them almost got beaten 4 times. They all contacted their attorneys and said, the attorneys advised the inmates to write down everything that happened, to have a detailed written statement about the inmates. And then the letters were later sent to Isaac Stryger. And he's a lawyer who has been dealing with many brutality cases here in Sonoma County. And so far, no action has been done by the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors, and Sheriff Steve Freitas has denied any of the beatings that happened. And he claims that the police or the deputies were only reporting to or responding to a riot that had been happening inside the inmate cells. And so far, the sheriffs have not been wanting to release any videos that happened that night or the day that the beatings happened.
Alright, so I'm going to focus more on the literature review part of our paper. So to start off, there's supposed to be 4 different types of civilian review boards. The first is when there's an individual agency that investigates citizen complaints and make recommendations to the police chief. In this class, there are appointed representatives that are board members who work with a full-time staff. The second class is where the investigations are done by internal affairs in the police chief's office. The third is where the police department is allowed to handle complaints through an independent auditor and or through the police chief's office. In this scenario, the police department gets the final call in the decision, but the complainant can appeal that decision. And then fourth is a full-on auditor system where the police department has full authority, but the auditor can review and make recommendations on what the police chief decided to do during the complaints. Okay, so we looked at 2 different civilian review boards that we liked and we used in our own plan. The first is the Flint, Michigan Civilian Review Board. And this one is an ombudsman system where there's basically one person who takes all the complaints for any type of city agency, but 50% of those usually have to do with the police department. I didn't put the thing up here, but the process works as the ombudsman gets a complaint from a citizen, and then he has 2 options, whether to investigate it or whether to do an informal mediation through an exploration of police procedure and or referral to supervisors of the police officer in question. The other option is that the ombudsman chooses to investigate the complaint. And in this case, the ombudsman hears what the citizen says, and then he sends all of his information to the police chief, who then interviews everybody involved in the case, and all this is recorded, and then all of that gets sent to the ombudsman, who then chooses to what actions will be taken further, and he reveals his results to the public, which is considered to be one of his main powers as an ombudsman. Okay, so one of the top sources that we used in our paper is called Citizen Oversight of Law Enforcement, Challenge and Opportunity, which focuses on basically the pros and cons of having a civilian review board. Joe Farrow, the writer, argues that the most effective way to promote positive behavior, ensure greater responsibility, and deter malpractice is through a civilian review board, and that the community needs to feel heard in order for there to be a trust between the police and the community. He mentions a couple of issues, however. First of all, that a civilian review board can be a large financial investment when you count having a building to use, having a full staff. And places that have a big issue with crime usually don't have as much budget to afford that, which can be an issue. And then the second issue that he mentioned is when a civilian review board is implemented as a response to a controversial case such as Andy Lopez, because then you run the issue that the police department may think that they're being punished instead of looking at it as a way to build trust between themselves and the community. The biggest point that he makes is that the police chief is the most essential piece of the puzzle to having a successful civilian review board. Farrow argues that by setting rigorous selection standards to recruit and develop more restraint-oriented and trainable officers, instituting training programs relevant to today's community policing, and promoting the use of subcultural socialization to further organizational goals, a civilian review board can be very effective.
So I'm going to talk about our plan. We kind of, like he said, we mixed together the San Jose and Flint model. Currently we're using the fourth type of citizen review boards, which is the audit model, but we were hoping to use the citizen investigation model. A citizen investigation model is where citizens investigate allegations of police misconduct and they recommend the findings to the chief. We also really liked them sharing it to the public because I think that the public has a right to know. So their jurisdiction would be in Sonoma County. And there would be a few key actors. There would be an independent auditor who evaluates officers' service and procedures, an assistant auditor who conducts follow-up investigations, intakes citizen complaints, and assists the independent auditor. There's going to be a complaint analyst that analyzes complaints, and then a community outreach program that kind of markets the whole board and conducts community education and outreach, and then an office specialist, which is just somebody to work in the office. The jobs that we decided to include, mediation was pretty important because we think that that will help the trust level. Mediation is so that the officer and the complainant can choose if they want to work it out together or not. And then the early warning process is IA gives the Citizen Advisory Board the names of the top 5 officers with the most complaints, and then the independent auditor would meet with them and give them the warnings. And then restorative justice is mostly mediation. And then all complaints against the police that allege violence will be reviewed, and then all police shootings and no less than 15% of any other complaints. I forgot to put a slide, but our budget would be $473,600, and we get this by taking 0.1% of the developmental services. Right now, there's 37% of Sonoma County's budget allocated to just development, so we thought 0.1% isn't that bad. And that includes salaries of everything, operating costs, equipment, contractual services, and there's $4,000 left over for miscellaneous. And we mostly think that the finger pointing is the biggest problem. Like, it just needs to be, there's a lot of miscommunication happening between citizens and the police, and the police are saying that the citizens are doing something wrong, and the citizens are saying the police are doing something wrong, so I don't think that there should be a problem with having somebody step in as an unbiased party to kind of maneuver that. That's it.
Thank Thank you, everybody. We have one final group of students that are going to be talking about Fukushima radiation and nuclear power issues. And some people may wonder, well, what does that have to do with Sonoma County? But our next group of students are going to tell us that. So please come on up. Where? Somebody retrieve them. Well, we're gonna put two websites up here, so we're gonna change the slideshow here in a moment. So here is our group. They're gonna talk about nuclear power, issues of radiation. They, in addition to working with Peter Phillips, worked with one of the community members, John Bertucci, who works with Fukushima Response. And of course, Project Censored is no stranger to this story. It's been in our last several books, actually every book since it happened, and it's also looking like it's going to be in our next book that's coming out this fall. We did, in fact, one of the lecture series on that event, and it seems like every few months we're talking about it on our weekly radio show at KPFA. So it's not going away, and these folks are going to talk to us more about that issue. So please introduce yourselves to the group, to the crowd here, and tell us what you're going to do. Because I'm going to put them on the website in a second. Yeah. I'm going to change it for
Okay. Hi, I'm Bethany Bullard, Marissa Hanneman,
and Joel Garcia.
And our research focused on the long-term effects of nuclear radiation contamination from the Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. So there is little research on the subject right now and a shortage of media coverage. And although we are aware of the radiation contamination in the Pacific Ocean, there is a lack of information of the overall health effects of radiation contamination and how it will affect the ecosystem and the population that depends on it. So through interviews with local professionals of the Fukushima disaster, we are able to uncover these effects of radiation and that the media has not reported and how it will affect Sonoma County. Many Sonoma County residents are unaware of how radiation exposure will affect themselves as well as their families. And through education and awareness, preventative measures can be taken to protect families and other residents. So we aim to report what individuals in the community can do to protect themselves if and when Fukushima radiation arrives at the West Coast at a higher and more damaging rate. Our research question is, how does Fukushima radiation affect Sonoma County and the surrounding areas?
So first, I'm going to talk to you guys about our literature review. We read multiple articles with the help of John Bertucci and Gina Brooks, who sent us a ton of articles and from their Fukushima Facebook page. We got some articles. So some of the stuff that we learned, first with the bodega fish economy. During World War I, Bodega's Bay's commercial fishing industry boomed as salmon drove the local economy, and how the current commercial fishermen focus on albacore tuna, chincook salmon, halibut, rockfish, Dungeness crab, sole, and more recently with sea urchins. And then a little background on Fukushima. How many people here know about Fukushima and the radiation? Okay, so a good amount. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail since you guys know a lot. It happened on March 11, 2011, as the earthquake magnitude being 9 hit the eastern coast of the main island of Japan. And most of you know that 4 reactors and 3 nuclear cores were damaged during the tsunami, which caused radiation isotopes to leak in the atmosphere and into the ocean. And how there wasn't a plan for this, so the government didn't really have any plan for this, what they would do. And it also resulted in 200 to 300 tons of groundwater to cool the systems. And then that leads me into the exposure of radiation. And we don't know exact amounts from the government since they turned off the EPA monitors after the event, which most people here I'm sure know. And they reported 25 out of the 124, or 20% of the EPA air monitoring stations weren't working during the Fukushima event, which is a lot of EPA monitors. And this affects our ecosystem a lot, which most of you do know as well. There has been an increase in marine death thus including body tumors that have been found on the Pacific. This also includes Alaskan fish, Canadian whitefish, sea lions, walruses, polar bears, sharks who are supposed to be immune to tumors, but there has been humor-like skin cancer found on shark off the coral reef in Alaska's Great Barrier Reef, which is interesting. As well as that according to the NOAA Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory, radiation along the west coast of the U.S. could eventually be 10 times higher than it was in some places in Japan in the future, which we'll go in a little more into later. And also one thing we did focus on is sailors and Marines that were affected when they were on the USS Ronald Reagan, and the TEPCO lawsuit occurring right now in Japan. There was 51 sailors and Marines who experienced this illness that included thyroid cancer, testicular cancer, brain cancer, unusual urine problems, excessive urine bleeding, and other gynecological problems that weren't seen in a population of 20-year-olds and 23-year-olds. And also as well, the sailors were ingesting radiation through their food, water, and air. They were cleaning up the ship, and they were told to do this by the government, and TEPCO and the government weren't telling them the effects of radiation or what problems could come from the future, and they came home not knowing of their health effects. So there is a lawsuit currently going on if anyone didn't know that. And John originally told us about some of the prevention that we could do to prevent nuclear power, including the German government has been carrying out policies phasing out nuclear energy since 1998. And in June 2011, the government decided to shut down 8 nuclear power plants and limit operation, and they want to completely get rid of all nuclear power by 2022. And they want to move towards a fossil fuel-based energy generation. And also, the government plans to upgrade and expand its electricity grid in the next 10 years, shutting down. They've now shut down 17 plants. And then that was my part on the literature review. Now we're going to go into our findings. Or methods, sorry.
Where is John Bertucci? Where is that man? There he is, everyone. Please give a hand for him, all right? This guy right here is the main reason, and he was a huge help to our Fukushima project. He's the lead organizer of the Fukushima Response Group located in Sonoma County. He's also our huge network with the local professionals, such as members of the Fukushima Response Group. For example, Gina Brooks, who's heavily involved with FRG, short for Fukushima Response Group. And then Linda Spiel, the president of the Peace and Roots Alliance. So we went along with interviews. It was like semi-structured. We went with a flow because we wanted to see where it would lead, because everyone's response was going to be different. And we created an interview guide broken up into 3 sections to aid us during the interviews: water contamination, local effects, and policy prevention, which is also what led us to do semi-structured interviews. And each semi-structured interview was an hour long. We will discuss that later on, but the focus was on Sonoma County and Bodega, and throughout the interview we wanted to get their opinion on the radiation and contamination of Fukushima and health effects in Sonoma. And John was a huge help. Like when we first met with him, he discussed the total breakdown of Fukushima. And a lot of us in the group had no idea what Fukushima really was, just that, it was a nuclear explosion power plant. But after discussing with John, he gave us access. He showed us his Facebook page. He gave us access to information to a whole bunch of professionals in the community.
So our initial interest in Fukushima began when we read an article written by Dar Jamal in Truthout. He wrote it in January of 2016, and he reported on interviews with professionals explaining how radiation from Fukushima is reaching our coast along the west. So we decided to call him. He lives in Seattle, so we did a brief phone interview, and the first thing he told us was as of March 2016, he hasn't heard any new updates. But he does say that the radiation from Fukushima is still a problem. He went on to say that the cores of the plant are still emitting radiation, and TEPCO is unable to contain it right now. They're using groundwater to flush out and cool down the cores, but this is just flushing more radiation into the ocean. So official argues that the radiation in the ocean is so dilute, but the problem is radiation is cumulative and persistent. And he talked about how bioaccumulation illustrates this example, and that's when larger fish eat more doses or more concentrations of smaller fish exposed to radiation, and the radiation just accumulates in the larger fish. So one piece of tuna will have a high concentration of radiation. So we then asked why he thinks the EPA shut down the radiation monitors, and he emphasized how the EPA does not want to create any public pushback towards nuclear power policies, and they don't want to create public panic. He went on to say that nuclear power has a lot of political and financial ties, and the nuclear lobby is very powerful, especially in law. And so not only does this keep people ignorant of the damage of Fukushima, but it also prevents data from being collected and evidence from being produced and reported in the media. So it is through independent monitoring that we can uncover these damages of radiation in the ocean. He says that we need updated data, interviews with scientists, and resources to show that there is a problem. We asked him if he thought the local fish economy of Bodega Bay would be affected by the radiation from Fukushima, and he explained that it most likely would not. He says many people do not know that the fish are contaminated or will be contaminated. He even said that if data went on to show that there was radiation contamination in the fish, people would not really understand what that means, and the government would change its measuring criteria, much like the BP oil disaster. So he then went on to say that there is no safe level of radiation, and while the government claims that there isn't a problem, experts do say that radiation exposure increases your likelihood of health risks. So he believes that public safety should definitely be a concern, as a lot of the fish have been shown to be contaminated with radiation. He says the best way to decrease your exposure is to cut back on fish consumption and avoid fish from the northern Pacific, as this is where radiation runoff is moving towards.
So like I said earlier, John Bertucci was our first look into our research and trying to figure out Fukushima. And he also gave us connections to pretty much everyone else we interviewed and local activists. And so John Bertucci is the executive director of Petaluma Community Access Television. He started looking into Fukushima the summer of 2010. And we didn't have a questionnaire interview guide yet because we were starting from nowhere. So he helped us build our questionnaire guide. But one quote we do have from him was, "Risks that are involved with nuclear power is too much." And he also mentioned we need to have a clear and clean power, and it is possible. He is the one who told us about Germany, which is hope if it happens, but with companies and corporations, we don't really see that happening anytime soon. But he also did introduce us to the Fukushima Response Group and the Facebook page, which has articles that are posted daily. And that is where we met Linda Spiel and Gina Brooks. Linda Spiel is president of Peace Roots Alliance in Petaluma, California. And Linda discussed the local concern for radiation, and she also went over how samples can be collected. Me and Bethany went to the lab in the MedCom Inc. lab in Sebastopol, and she helped us show how we can test items for radiation like bark, crab, seaweed, etc. And we did some testing on ourselves. We did not find anything as of yet. But so she showed us that, and she also said that it is important to know that you can test your samples and to be aware of it. And we also asked Linda who should be educating our community, and she replied it should be a part of public health.
So Gina Brooks was also a really important figure in our research. She is a member of the Fukushima Response Group, and she does radiation testing weekly at the International MedCom Inc. lab in Sebastopol. She's been involved with radiation monitoring, testing, and education since 2011, immediately after the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant meltdown. And she focuses on testing right now in order to establish a baseline of what the levels are before radiation from Fukushima reaches our coast. So during our interview, she explained that right now we should be concerned with the radiation levels in large traveling fish such as tuna. Personally, she has cut back her consumption of fish, and she's limited it even more for her young son, as women and children are more susceptible to the health risks. We asked her who she thought should be responsible for testing radiation levels, whether it be in the water, the fish, or the atmosphere. And she said theoretically it should be the responsibility of TEPCO, as it was their negligence that led to the radiation contamination. However, large corporations like TEPCO are known for being irresponsible, and the government is denied any problem at all. She went on to say that the shutdown of the EPA monitors right after Fukushima proved that the government cannot be trusted, as they are negligently withholding information. This leaves independent monitoring so we can hold the corporations accountable for the damages of nuclear radiation. Gina's main concern is the health of the public, especially for children. Education in the form of a solution and safety measures needs to be provided to citizens. There are 3 things to remember when it comes to radiation: learn, measure, and avoid. Bringing awareness to people is an important step in public safety, according to Gina. She says teaching people how to measure radiation with Geiger counters and to be aware of contaminated food is an important measure that will have to be the responsibility of concerned citizens. Everyone should have access to information about radiation, but since the media and corporations responsible are downplaying the damages, the responsibility has fallen into concerned citizens' hands, such as the Fukushima Response Group. When it comes to finding a radioactive object on the beach, she explained that it should be treated like a piece of medical waste. You can call a state program, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to dispose of it. So then we went on to ask her how she thought it would affect the economy for Bodega Bay and the local fish supply. She explained that if the radiation levels were being tested and more people were educated on the effects, it would definitely hurt the economy. And we asked her how she thought we could prevent another incident like Fukushima from happening. And she says our first steps are to shut down our nuclear plants, to stop building nuclear plants on fault lines, and taking care of the dangerous materials nuclear energy produces. There are alternatives such as wind, solar, and hydroelectric power that can be used instead of nuclear energy. As our interview was drawing towards an end, we inquired as to whether or not she thought Germany's transition of weaning off of nuclear energy would be successful, and she did say she thinks it will be a successful transition. She says that nuclear energy is not worth the damages that it produces. And we also tried to get in touch with the UC Davis Marine Lab. It's located at Bodega Head State Park, and when we tried to talk to them, a representative was very quick to say that they have they're doing absolutely no research on radiation with Fukushima, and they do not want to start anything.
And then I was trying to get in touch with Arnie Gunderson, him and his wife are in charge of the Fairwinds website, if people are familiar. But he was actually in Japan doing testing and research on Fukushima at the time. So I have emailed him recently, and we had a brief conversation, and I listened to his interview on Project Censored. And Arnie Gunderson has 45 years of nuclear energy experience and is a former senior vice president of Nuclear Power Company, and he is currently working for Fairwinds organization. His wife, Maggie Gunderson, in 2008 started Fairwinds website, and her goal is to educate the public about nuclear power production. On the interview through Project Censored, Arnie mentioned he was just in Japan for a month and that the issues have risen. He took over 100 samples of radioactive material in Japan, and he came to the conclusion that the area is becoming recontaminated. He also mentioned that Japan is wanting to move the families back into the original cities, and therefore they are raising the radiation standards to 20 times higher than they previously were. They're raising the levels, but however he mentions that the most concerning thing is that he noticed kids are playing in the dust and playing around the homes, and that the kids are 10 times more susceptible to it there, and girls are even 20 times more acceptable than adults. So that is, he said, the most concerning factor. And then he suggested a way we could prevent future nuclear power is spreading education awareness through the internet, and if everyone put a single solar collector on their roof, it would limit the amount of nuclear power's income and profit, and therefore it would be harder for them to keep making a profit, which could limit nuclear power for the future. And if you want to go to fairwinds.org, you can check out more information there.
We got to contact Ken, I apologize, I might butcher up his last name, Buesler. He was introduced to us by John. We conducted a brief interview over email. He doesn't have a lot of time. He's a very busy guy. He is a Marine radiochemist with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. So we're going to call it WUI, because that's what the initials break it down, so it's going to be fun, WUI. And WUI, and he's also the director of WUI Center for Marine and Environmental Radioactivity. He conducted sampling in the West Coast seawater in 2014 to see if there was any detectable cesium-134. His first report he doesn't really describe it as a failure, but it was like a sample. It was at from Point Reyes, La Jolla, and 2 cities in Washington, but there was no detectable cesium-134. And I do, yes. Sorry, got a whole bunch of papers up here. We interviewed Caroline Higgins. She's otherwise known as C, and she is a policies organizer for, I'm forgetting the name. What was it? Surfrider. And she oftentimes she goes and does like beach trips with the community and she finds items on the beach, and actually a couple weeks ago, well, from when we did the presentation the interview, she found a couple objects from Japan, and she mentioned that the debris we found in the beach is actually Bodega Bay, starts appearing in the Aleutian Island, and will eventually start moving along the California coast. Items from Fukushima could arrive along the west coast at different rates depending on the size, shape, and ocean currents. Her main focus is to prevent nuclear disaster in Sonoma County, and that's supported because she stated that Bodega is one of the first anti-nuclear towns to keep nuclear power plants out, and that's based on the Bodega Head history. That there was so Bodega Head was actually going to have a nuclear plant put in, but it was luckily fought upon, and it didn't get the clear. So we asked her what could be the solutions for the future, and her response was social media is the answer. How old activists and people who are capable of collaborating through mainstream media need to discuss and compromise to make a change. She emphasized unification, which is to find common ground and all pursued it. Another important question was, how was it that Sonoma County and the North Coast are not educated about Fukushima, yet they are known as one of the first anti-nuclear towns? C said a possible reason could be how hard it is to spread awareness when there is mainly volunteers. She only gets volunteers. And if Bodega Bay is contaminated with Fukushima radiation, she believes the local economy will be greatly impacted, since she noticed how hurtful it was for the community when the crab population was unsellable due to algae. And then in conclusion, based on our research, we discovered the lack of education and awareness of Fukushima radiation contamination and the effects it will bring to Sonoma County. Ecosystems especially, and the oceanic ecosystem will experience unnatural growth in the forms of tumors, newly developing cancers in species, and mass die-offs of the populations. We realized how important education on these effects of Fukushima radiation is to the local residents in Sonoma County. It is through education that we inform the public and radiation contamination and how to avoid severe effects. And it is by following how Bethany stated earlier that Germany has been a leading example. It is best if we follow their lead that the United States can prevent any further pollution of nuclear radiation before there is too much contamination to control or clean up.
One more thing to add, and I forgot to mention earlier, is Dar, who works for Truthout, said that the Fukushima plume will really hit the West Coast in 2017, really hit its peak in 2018, and will stay along the West Coast until about 2026. That's just one more fact I wanted to add.
So let's give a round of applause for these students. All very heavy topics, of course, this evening, but it's also important that some solutions are given, and one of the solutions that everybody hit on is just raising awareness. That's really one of the first steps. And certainly I'd like to bring, if any of the students, all the students are still here, please come up. Would like to recognize all of you again for Peter Phillips' Investigative Sociology class. And while we're doing that, we'll get them all up here and then give them a round of applause. I wanted to share one of my favorite Carl Jensen quotes. Carl Jensen was the founder of Project Censored in 1976. Peter Phillips took over 20 years later. And Andy Roth and I have been at the helm for the last 6 or 7 years, working with over 20 campuses around the U.S. And also the radio show that you heard mentioned earlier. We're now in 35 cities across the U.S. So a big part of what we do is try to raise awareness, public awareness, through education and through media, particularly independent media, rather than trying to reform corporate media. So please give a round of applause to all these students. Because it's these people and the next generation of folks that are going to be able to really help us change the way things operate. And when Carl started Project Censored in 1976, he developed an alternative definition of censorship that I think is pretty instructive. And rather than starting with the source of censorship as traditionally defined, with the obligation of an elite to protect the masses somehow from certain kinds of information, Carl's definition started at the other end with the failure of information to actually reach the people, to actually reach the public where it matters most. And for the purposes of this project, Project Censored, Carl said, and of course Peter and now Andy and I repeat this often, for the purposes of this project, censorship is defined as the suppression of information, whether purposeful or not, by any method, including bias, omission, underreporting, or self-censorship, which prevents the public from fully knowing what is happening in the world. In short, censorship is anything that interferes with the free flow of information in a society that purports to have a free press system. And one step in creating a more media literate society is through education, and these folks are all standing here as exemplars of participating in that process. So thanks to them, and thanks to Peter Phillips for continuing to do the good work he does at Sonoma State. Thank you all for coming, and thank everybody here at Aqus. Thanks to Peter Phillips. Thanks for his wonderful students in investigative sociology that are going to continue to do public sociology. And they're going to continue to be publicly involved in the community to try to solve these kinds of problems. So you can catch Project Censored every Friday at 1 o'clock on KPFA for our radio show. You can catch us this summer at the Petaluma Progressive Festival, and we'll have a 40th anniversary celebration October 21 and 22 at Sonoma State University. Thanks again, everybody, for coming out. We'll see you again next fall for the resuming of this lecture series here at Aqus Cafe. And please kindly, carefully clean up a little bit after yourselves and try to help the folks working here get out of here. Again, I'd like to thank them for letting us stay a little bit after. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.